Welcome to Better Baker Academy. I'm Jen Barney. I'm a proud bakery owner, mom, and wife. I created Better Baker Academy because our industry needs a practical and fast resource to help guide new bakers into the world of fast-paced pastry kitchens. At the same time, our bakery owners and management teams need help in training our staff in a way that is efficient, thorough, and sets our teams up for the most success. Let's get real for a second. Training new staff is hard and it is expensive, and it pulls your best people away from production. On a parallel note, poorly trained staff that are shuffled in without a clear plan will never reach their best potential, and oftentimes the lack of support and organization leads to job dissatisfaction. I created this program because I needed this in my own business. When I first started my retail bakery, I found that I was overwhelmed. I was losing my best staff because they were feeling frustrated by my lack of organization, and I was allowing inappropriate behavior from other staff because my bandwidth was too overwhelmed to train properly and to follow through with implementing kitchen standards. I was only one person, and I could not effectively keep up with the demands of having a large kitchen staff. So what did I do? Besides cry a lot, seriously, I started slowly educating myself on how to build a strong team. I leaned on my industry and HR experts in my community to help guide me. I took mentorship from any and all places that I could find them. I always felt that I had so much to learn, and I still continue to learn. Better Baker Academy was created simply because I wanted to find a better way to help guide my staff so everyone could get to doing what we do best, which is creating amazing desserts. I created Better Baker Academy because as a business owner, I did not want to waste money with poorly trained staff. I created Better Baker Academy because as a career pastry chef, I have worked in so many toxic kitchens, and I want to create a pastry world where all staff feel supported. Please join me in creating better kitchens, better businesses, and ultimately better bakers. Let's learn the basics on how to use a 3-compartment dish sink. The first step is simply to scrape all the debris on your dirty dishes into the garbage. This first sink is only meant for soapy water. You really want to aim for warm soapy water, about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. You also want the water to be fully sudsy. If at any point it gets to be too dirty or the suds go down, you definitely want to replenish this water. The middle sink is purely intended for water and for rinsing out your dishes and getting rid of all the extra soap suds that might remain on them. The third sink is filled to the brim with sanitizer, and the idea is that you submerge your dishes for at least 30 seconds to fully sanitize them. And then, of course, you want to air dry at the end. If you are lucky enough to have a 4-compartment sink, it follows the same pattern, except you just have an extra sink at the beginning to scrape your dishes with. Let's talk about measuring and scaling ingredients accurately. Always use a digital scale whenever possible, especially for baking, because baking really is a science, and using a weighted measurement is much more precise than scooping with measuring cups or spoons. When using a digital scale, place your empty container on the scale and then hit the tare or 0 button so that it resets back to 0. Then you add your ingredient until you reach the needed weight. Double check that the scale is using the proper unit of measure for the recipe that you're following. Meaning, if it's calling for grams, make sure that you're measuring grams. Never feel embarrassed to ask if you need help using a digital scale, because I have found that beginner bakers always have a hard time using a scale. I mean, it is kind of intimidating when you first start. So slow down and ask the questions so you're measuring properly. Real quick, a safety concern that I like to share with all of my staff is how to properly clean these vents that are on every single refrigerator. So this is what happens. New staff come in, they don't know how to clean them, and they take their hands and they go in and do this motion. But it's pretty sharp under there, and you're gonna slice your fingers pretty quickly. And it's happened to me, and it happens to multiple staff who don't know what they're doing. So really quick, all you have to do is just have a buffer between the surface and your fingers and go in and clean through those vents like this. You'll thank me, trust me. Let's talk about the very exciting topic of properly cleaning a bathroom. Let's get right into it. So first, you wanna use single-use paper towels, something like this, or something like this. Really avoid using cloth towels because we want to get rid of that bacteria and dispose of it right away. Let's clean all glass surfaces next with any type of industrial glass cleaner, or vinegar works really well. Just be careful with vinegar because you can't mix vinegar and bleach. And we're taking our time to make sure every glass surface is nice and clean and streak-free. Whenever you're cleaning glass, you need to make sure that you go in at the end when it's almost dry to really give it that streak-free finish. Let's learn how to clean the sink. This is pretty basic. We're using an all-purpose cleaner. And I'm not just cleaning the sink, I'm also cleaning the wall around the sink because it's pretty common for soap dispensers to drip onto the wall, and also for people to splash on the wall, and that can leave little residue or little droplet residues that you can see. So we're always going to take that extra step of cleaning the walls around the sink. As I clean, first thing that I'm going to focus on is removing anything on the top, like these extra toilet paper rolls, only because we need to make sure we are cleaning every surface, and we want to get rid of that. And I'm going in and getting everything. I'm getting down in the bottom, and I'm paying very close attention to this nook on the floor that always gets missed. Nobody ever wants to clean in the bottom, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to do a really great job of cleaning the toilet. So I'm going to go in, start from the top, and just start getting rid of all of the dust that builds up on top of this toilet. And I'm paying very close attention to all those nooks and crannies, especially around these corners. Oh, did I mention to put gloves on? You should wear gloves for all of this. My next step is to get into this nook here. Nobody ever wants to clean this nook. With this toilet bowl cleaner, just one thing I'm always paying close attention to is I'm not mixing chemicals because you can really create toxic gases with that. So just be always mindful about the chemicals that you're using when you're cleaning your bathroom. All right, so we're getting in there. We're getting in all of the nooks and crevices. All right, so we just cleaned this back corner. Now that it's nice and clean, I can put all of my plungers and my toilet cleaning tools back into the nook. I can flush my toilet. And I'm going to change my gloves out and get fresh ones for the next step. Nook and cranny. You know, mopping is pretty basic. We're going to want to use any kind of sanitizer solution in here. The key is to get, like everything else, get into those nooks and crannies. Don't be lazy. Everybody wants to skimp on this. I mean, nobody wants to clean the bathrooms, right? But it's part of our job. It's part of the health of our business. And it absolutely reflects on the cleanliness of our business. So make sure you sweep around and under the garbage containers. Move any of your storage containers. that are just kind of hanging out on the floor. And I always take a lot of pride when you're mopping. In front of us, we have the last stage in the 3-compartment dish sink, and this is meant for sanitized water. At my bakery, we use bleach to turn regular water into sanitized water. And I thought it'd be great to show you how to do this. Without any bleach, when we dip this in, do you see that there's no color change on the chlorine test strip? So this has nothing in it. Now, we will start adding the bleach in small increments. And here you can see that we're testing with a medium gray color, which is almost exactly where I want it to be, and I think it's good enough that I can walk away from this project. But just for the sake of learning, let's add a little more bleach so you can see what it's like when there's too much bleach in the water. Whoa, did you see how dark that test strip got? This is an indicator that we've used too much bleach in the water. Let's take a closer look at these 3 test strips together. The first had no bleach in it, purely water. The second one was just right with the perfect amount of bleach. And the third one definitely had too much bleach because that strip is just too dark. So when you are testing your sanitized water, keep this color chart in your frame of reference. How do you check food temperature? Well, with a thermometer, of course. One thing about a thermometer is that you need to keep them clean and sanitized because they can absolutely transfer bacteria if they are dirty. You can clean a thermometer by dipping the probe in sanitation water for 30 seconds and wiping it dry. Do not put a thermometer through a dish machine or submerge it in water. It is always a good idea to calibrate thermometers to make sure they are accurate. Most bakeries use digital thermometers because we need very specific temperature controls when making items like caramel. So I'm going to assume that the bakery you work at uses a digital thermometer. Another thing you need to know about all thermometers is that they can get tweaked and give false reads. The good news is they usually can be recalibrated to bring them back to temperature. As a baker, you need to learn how to calibrate a thermometer. It is not something you need to do all of the time, especially if you're working with digital thermometers. However, if your gut is telling you that the thermometer reading is off, it is time to check it. To calibrate a digital thermometer, you can use either the boiling point or freezing point method. The boiling point method involves placing the thermometer in boiling water, which is 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you adjust your thermometer to match the expected temperature. The freezing point follows the same method, but instead uses an ice bath, which is 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Many digital thermometers have a calibration feature, often accessible through a button or menu. This allows you to easily adjust the reading to match the known temperature. It is important to know where to use your thermometer when you're temping product. You need to temp in the middle of whatever it is that you are working on. If it is a pot of boiling sugar, you need to temp it in the middle of the pot in the middle of the boiling sugar, not at the bottom or at the top, because you will get an inaccurate read. If you are temping meat, it needs to be in the center of the thickest portion of the meat, and it never hurts to check the temperatures more than once. Hi, I want to cover the topic of handing off an order to a client. And in this category, if there's one thing that I can have you ingrain in your memory, is that every single time you hand off an order to a client, you need to stop and slow down and look over the entire ticket before the client leaves through the door. And for our business, we use labels that have the client name and the number of boxes per total order on each box. So for example, this says Jen Barney, 1 of 2 boxes, 2 of 2 boxes. And when we are handing this off, we're paying attention to how many boxes we're grabbing, and we're also looking over that ticket. Because if you miss this step, what happens is, but we all know what this feels like, right? You're busy, you just grab the order, you hand it to the client, they leave. But if you miss something, that client is instantly upset at the business. And you also would have to give that client a full refund of an order that's already made, which loses the bakery money. So this is such an important thing that is so simple. Stop, slow down, and look through the entire ticket. Hi, I wanted to share what our ingredient and allergy book looks like. Now, this really resolved a problem that my bakery was having. When we first opened, we didn't have a clear way to communicate what ingredients or allergens were in our most commonly made retail items or what allergens were in our cakes, which is what we sell the most of. So this was a solution to that problem. And what it is a full chart of our most commonly made items. And we have the ingredients, what the shelf life is, and what allergens are associated with each specific recipe. And we have this up front so that our customers can have access to it. And we also have one in the back for our staff. And this has just been a great tool that I come back to this probably at least once a week, just because somebody wants to know the information, and then we can just show them and they can purchase with confidence. I'd like to talk to you about the importance of learning how to issue refunds and handle customer complaints with confidence. Now, this is definitely something that you will grow into. I mean, your first couple weeks at the bakery, you probably won't feel comfortable doing this, but this is such an important thing for you to be able to do on several different levels. The first is that from a customer's perspective, when they come in and they're upset or they're calling because we made a mistake or missed something, they want their issue handled immediately. They don't want you to have to say, well, I'm new or I don't feel comfortable doing this. I'm gonna call you back, or I'll let my boss know and they'll call you back. Not that that's not an important step if it's a really major issue, because you should escalate it if it's a bad issue. But those everyday indiscrepancies, I want you to handle it immediately, because we want that customer dealt with right away, and we want to turn it around, and we want to impress them with our customer service skills. So my advice would be that the second that you feel comfortable in taking those customer complaints and refunds, I want you to empower yourself to learn that as quickly as possible and to take ownership and to help your bakery out by being a good example of how to have great customer service and handle refunds quickly. Hi, I'm Jen Barney with Better Baker Academy, and I wanted to share with you one of the best things that I ever did for my business, and it was creating lookbooks that had detailed pricing information. And these came out of frustration, because it's really difficult to train staff how to charge for artistic detailing when it comes to high-end desserts or detailed cakes. And for me, I needed a very clear way that I could talk to my staff, but then also my customers, so that was really clear on what our pricing was. So let me just show you kind of the formula for this. And when we open up the book, the first page is what our complimentary designs are, so things that we're not going to charge extra for. And another key thing here that we have is every single cake that we have in this book has a unique number associated with it. And that way, when a customer comes in and, for example, if they love this design, this is design number 17, we can just write number 17 on the ticket, and we know exactly how we should decorate the cake, and it just helps. It's just a very clear way to communicate instead of having to type all the details out. But as this book goes, we have page spreads by type of design or type of event. So this spread represents what would be great for little kids. This one is more teenage level or middle school age kid cakes. And then we go into graduation cakes and adult birthday cakes. And then we have some examples of pricing on more detailed cakes. But ultimately, this is just a great tool to communicate effectively across all parties what we charge. And then we have a wedding lookbook that follows the same formula, but there's one unique thing that I do with the wedding cakes, and that's that I have a price sheet that I specifically have that can be removed because our prices change year to year, and that way I don't have to buy a brand new book every year. But what's cool about this is we can go to any design, like let's say number 8. I can look here and I can see that number 8 is a tort cake with mounded fresh berries. And then I say that the fresh berries are an extra $1 per slice. And then I have the pricing in 3 different size categories for 3-tiered cakes. So any person can look at this and they would know exactly how much it would cost for the servings that you need. So take it for what it's worth. I just have found that this is a great resource for my bakery. And if you are struggling with communicating how to charge for cakes, this is a solution to the problem. Let's learn how to manage inventory. At Meringue Bakery, we use a master list that's printed off, and we also use an inventory management tool to track our inventory stock. But every staff member has to speak up and help the cause. If you see that the bakery is low on something, write it down or tell your supervisor. Assume some items may take a week to reorder, so please plan ahead. Remember, poor planning costs time and money, and you do not want to be the reason an ingredient is completely out and someone has to run to the store mid-shift. Every bakery tracks inventory differently, so please learn exactly how your bakery keeps track of product. However, if I can instill one piece of wisdom, it would be to take ownership in being accountable for your inventory. Plan your production in advance and make sure you have all your needed ingredients several days in advance of production. As a business owner, one of my biggest pet peeves is having a staff member need an emergency store delivery because they did not plan ahead when making random products. For example, if you are making a pastry item that is not a core ingredient or an ingredient that is only used sporadically, you need to take ownership and plan in advance to have the ingredient ordered in time for the weekly delivery. I want you to focus on creating a kind kitchen, which means that you approach everyone with respect. This does not mean that you're a pushover or that you do not stand up for yourself or your kitchen standards. However, it does mean that you need to learn to communicate with your teammates in a way that everyone feels that they can share ideas, learn from one another, and have a nice work experience, and ultimately create an organized kitchen. As a chef, your most important tool is not your mixers, your knives, or your ability to work quickly. It is your ability to communicate well. And let me repeat this because it is so important. Your most important tool is your ability to communicate well. Let me explain this. Great chefs can make great product, but if staff have difficulty working together, respecting one another, or creating a negative work environment, kitchen morale breaks down very quickly. This leads to high staff turnover, which means less productivity, and ultimately it can kill a bakery. Every owner or pastry kitchen has a distinctive style of decorating. As an employee, it is your job to maintain that same visual feel. For pastries, it is your responsibility to maintain the level of appearance on simple items like cookies. Does the business want you to have a fancy crumble-inspired cookie in the case? Well, then you should be making recipes that reflect that style and not simple drop-style cookies. Hygiene and what to wear in a bakery setting. My recommendation is to bathe and shower often, ideally daily, because sweat